Well, President Donald Trump is making the Smithsonian Institute great again. And of course, the liberal media is up in arms about it, and they absolutely can't stand it. So first, I want you to take a listen to how Good Morning America reported on this, and then I'm going to show you the actual truth of the matter on why President Donald Trump is essentially having the Smithsonian Institute audited, because the research that I've done on this institute and what's inside of it and how they're displaying America's history will not only shock you to your core, it will absolutely enrage you if you're a patriotic American.
President Trump says he has instructed his lawyers to scour through America's museums to rid them of exhibits he considers woke, specifically citing exhibits on slavery. President Trump targeted the Smithsonian museums, saying they are, quote, out of control, where everything discussed is how horrible our country is, how bad slavery was, and how unaccomplished the downtrodden have been. Back in March, the president signed an executive order directing the Smithsonian Institution, which runs more than 20 museums in Washington and elsewhere, to, quote, celebrate American exceptionalism and remove divisive or partisan narratives. Last month, the Smithsonian removed references to Trump in an exhibit on presidential impeachments in the Museum of American History. Mentions of Trump's impeachments were later restored, although with changes. Now he's complaining about exhibits on slavery, although during his first term, he visited the Museum of African American History and Culture, which tells the story of slavery and celebrates African American accomplishments, and he called it a, quote, truly great museum done with love.
So the way they're framing it is they want you to think President Donald Trump originally liked the Smithsonian Museum in his first term, and now, like anything else that the liberal media wants you to think with him, is they want you to believe that he's wish-washy, that he's all over the place with his thoughts, and now he suddenly has turned on the Smithsonian and he's completely against them. They also want you to think that President Donald Trump has an issue with the way the Smithsonian talks about the history of slavery in America. But that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, as they show here, they literally disprove their own narrative by showing that President Donald Trump visited this during his first term and was very happy with the exhibits overall, including the African American history one, especially at that time. President Donald Trump has no problem acknowledging the history of America. What the real problem is how the Smithsonian Institute has completely flip-flopped and is now only displaying the worst parts of American history, and they're doing so intentionally to frame America as a despicable, disgusting country. There's nothing patriotic about the way the Smithsonian currently displays our American history, and that's done so with a liberal narrative and agenda in mind. Starting first and foremost with the very simple fact that this is what is flying when you arrive at the Smithsonian. Yes, they have the American flag up, but look what they have underneath it. The Smithsonian flag, okay. And then there's the all-inclusive, whatever, blah, 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 LGBTQ, ABC plus flag flying underneath it. And this is just something, again, where I have to ask, need I say more? But I'm going to say more because I found so much disgraceful and honestly blatant lies from within the Smithsonian Institution on some of their exhibits. However, I am going to point out once again that this is what the entrance to the Smithsonian looks like. You are not greeted at the entrance of the Smithsonian with some cool life-size wax figure of Abraham Lincoln or George Washington. You're not greeted with a giant American flag to make you feel patriotic and proud of your American history and culture. You are greeted with a digital monitor displaying once again the all-inclusive of gender LGBTQ ABKDC flag. And it's right there, and it's just in the lobby, and that's supposed to make you feel good, apparently. But here's one of the biggest issues that President Trump has with the Smithsonian Institution. This is tweeted from the Rapid Response 47X page. This is Team Trump's page, meant to report all of the news pretty much before even mainstream media can pick it up, so that way you can see what's really going on and dodge media narrative bias. And on this Rapid Response 47 tweet, you see this is a real infographic produced by the Smithsonian in 2020 to educate people on the ways white people and their traditions, attitudes, and ways of life have been normalized. This is what President Trump means when he says the Smithsonian has long been out of control. Out of control. They've been out of control, but no longer under Trump. And so let's go over this. This is titled Aspects and Assumptions of Whiteness and white culture in the United States. Isn't that lovely? Let's see what they're preaching about here and how bad white culture is in America, right? White dominant culture, or whiteness, refers to the ways white people and their traditions, attitudes, and ways of life have been normalized over time and are now considered standard practices in the United States. Huh, that's interesting. What was the color of the people who wound up founding and settling America? Did white people just happen to start coming to America in the 1900s or something, and we've just managed to successfully normalize our culture and way of life? No. The founding fathers, the settlers, were all white Protestants. But let's continue with what this says. And since white people still hold most of the institutional power in America, we have all internalized some aspects of white culture, including people of color. So this is meant to inform all people of color on how whiteness has affected them over time from living in America, which is predominantly ruled by white people and influenced by white culture. So what this is doing is this is just showing off how bad white people are and white culture are for other cultures. So let's see what they think is bad about white people. Rugged individualism. The individual is the primary unit. Self-reliance, independence, and autonomy, highly valued and rewarded. Individuals assumed to be in control of their environment. You get what you deserve. Oh, that is such an evil white man part of culture, isn't it? Family structure. This is terrible. This family structure and whiteness just go hand in hand, and it's so bad. It's terrible for other cultures. The nuclear family. Oh my God, what a monstrosity the nuclear family was. Having a father, a mother, and 2.3 children on average is the ideal social unit. The husband is the breadwinner and head of the household. The wife is a homemaker and subordinate to the husband. Children should have their own rooms and be independent. This is just terrible. This whiteness spreading to all these other cultures, this is horrendous. For history, we have, based on Northern European immigrants' experience in the United States, with a heavy focus on the British Empire, the primacy of Western Greek, Roman, and Judeo-Christian tradition. You can hate on this fact all you want. It doesn't change the reality of it being a fact. America was founded and settled by Protestant Christians. This goes on to show just how terrible the Protestant work ethic is. Hard work is the key to success. Work before you play. If you didn't meet your goals, you didn't work hard enough. This is just terrible parts of white culture on display right here. I'm so glad they're pointing this out. Once again, religion. Christianity is the norm. Anything other than Judeo-Christian tradition is foreign. No tolerance for deviation from a single God concept. Wow! Imagine that. Our founding fathers and original settlers were all Protestant Christians. And so when you come to America, anything other than a Judeo-Christian tradition is outside of the norm. It's almost like when you come to this country, we already have traditions and culture in place, and you're not a part of that. And that's actually okay with us, by the way. Nobody says that it's not. They're trying to say that there's no tolerance for deviation from a single God concept. But if that were true, there would be not a single heathen living in America right now. There would be not a single person living in America that believed in multiple gods or no gods even. It would only be Christians. Clearly, there is tolerance in America for that. Here's another great one. Status, power, and authority. Wealth equals worth. Your job is who you are. Respect authority. Imagine that. Imagine this white culture telling people to respect authority. It's just evil and despicable of white people. Heavy value on ownership of goods, space, and property. Oh man, I love this one. Time. Following rigid time schedules and time viewed as a commodity. And now it still just continues to get more shameless, by the way. Under aesthetics, based on European culture, steak and potatoes, bland is bland is best. They're just openly this. It's a hilarious stereotype. Don't get me wrong. I'll play along with that any single day. But this whole white people don't season their food. Why people won't season their food? We season our food so much better because we was kings and shit. Come on now. This is utterly obnoxious what they're showing here in the Smithsonian Institute. Women's beauty based on blonde, thin Barbie. Well, there's no getting around that. There's a reason why Beyonce dyes her hair blonde or wears a blonde wig, whatever she does. There's a reason for that, okay? That's not our fault. A man's attractiveness based on economic status, power, and intellect. Okay, yep. That's only a white person thing. Give me a break. That's literally everywhere in the entire world. I won't continue reading on with this. It is utterly obnoxious and absurd. It just keeps going on. And all of this they're trying to say is white culture that could rub off onto other cultures here at the Smithsonian. And, you know, what I wound up doing here was I was curious because it says it's, you know, talking about race, and it's the NMAAHC. And so I wanted to see what that stood for. And as it would turn out, that stands for the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And you can see I pulled this up. This is right on the Smithsonian official website. And so what is this? Essentially, this is African American History and Culture Museum. So that brings me to the question, why on earth, if they're supposed to be talking about African American history and culture, why do they have something like this up talking about aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture? It has nothing to do with African American culture. This is a museum. This is not a lecture. This is not some college liberal class. This is the Smithsonian Institute. I would go there and I'd go into the African American exhibit expecting to see cool cultural stuff from Africa. I'd want to learn about their culture. I'd want to see artifacts on display. Imagine you walk in and you just see a giant sign and you're a white person and they're like, hey, yeah, just so you know, most of our visitors are probably white and we want you to know how much of a scumbag you all are. Like, what is this? And sadly, it doesn't end there. I found this article talking about how the Smithsonian's Latino exhibit is also a disgrace. The key takeaways of this article says a new Latino exhibit at the National Museum of American History offers an unabashedly Marxist portrayal of history, religion, and economics. The Latino exhibit simply erases the existence of the Hispanic who loves, contributes to, benefits from, and exemplifies the promise of American liberty, and we should refuse to allow our history and our stories to be subordinated and falsified on behalf of a radical left agenda like the one the Smithsonian is pushing. Bingo, that's why Trump is auditing them and forcing them to change all of this crap. Until this article points out downright false assertions in the Latino exhibit at the NMAH, including the United States stole 1/3 of Mexico in 1848. That's a lie. Cubans came here seeking economic opportunity, not escaping communist barbarism. That's a lie and very revisionist history. And the Texas Revolution was a defense of slavery against an abolitionist Mexico. Left-wing and Marxist dictators, including Fidel Castro, Hugo Chavez, Plutarco Elias Calles, and Daniel Ortega are not named even once. Right-wing autocrats such as Batista and Rafael, who left office more than half a century ago, are mentioned, and for the purposes of accusing the United States of supporting regional oppression in the fight against communism. And it just keeps getting worse. The more I dug and the more research I did, the more I found photos like this. This is on display in the Smithsonian. As you can see, they absolutely defiled the Statue of Liberty and called it artwork. And then to the right of that, you can see two pictures. The top one of a KKK member holding the American flag, and the bottom one of the American flag on fire. And just so you know what this is, what these two photos are in, is currently called the American Flag Star-Spangled Banner exhibit. And so rather than showing off the beautiful imagery of the American flag, showing off photos of like Iwo Jima and the famous flag and, 9/11 perhaps, and just the certain circumstances throughout history where the American flag has inspired and given hope to people who needed it the most. The Smithsonian instead chose to display images of KKK members holding the flag and of other protesters burning the American flag. That's their view of the importance of the American flag. And again, it's done deliberately. They want you to walk in and to leave feeling demoralized that you live in America. And that's why President Donald Trump is trying to put a stop to this, because it's disgraceful. Worse yet, some of our founding fathers and original inspirational historical figures like Benjamin Franklin aren't even safe. According to the Smithsonian Institute on their Benjamin Franklin exhibit, they claim that Benjamin Franklin's work in discovering electricity was tainted by oppression and slavery. And I'm not kidding, because once again, you can literally go right online on their official website, Benjamin Franklin's pioneering electrical work influenced today's technology. And yeah, they go through the history and they give him credit for certain things, but look what we have right here. This showcase also points out Franklin's ability to focus on invention and science stemmed in part from wealth he had gained through advertisements he published related to the sale of enslaved people and that he owned enslaved people. Though Franklin advocated for the abolition of slavery, he never freed any of these people during his lifetime. Historians still have much to learn about the involvement of enslaved people in Franklin's experiments. And so they have the nerve to include this in the exhibit when there is so little known about Benjamin Franklin and his relation to slaves and whether or not he used them or how many of them he had or didn't have. According to a lot of reports, the Benjamin Franklin exhibit just continually lectures about slavery, despite the fact that they openly admit that there's little to no evidence of it being tied in with Benjamin Franklin in the ways that they're trying to describe. And it's honestly just absolutely gross, and the American people are sick of BS like this. Now, interestingly enough, the final bits of research I did on all of this turns out that the director of the National Museum of African American History and Culture has been placed on indefinite leave. And as it would turn out, he was placed on indefinite leave back in March. And to the best of my knowledge, with the research I was able to do, he has still not returned to his position. And that leaves you wondering why that is. Could it be because of how much of a disaster the Museum of African American History and Culture was under his leadership? That remains to be seen. What I do know for a fact is, under President Donald Trump, stuff like what the Smithsonian is doing, literally our own American Institute, essentially preaching against our own American traditions and culture, is no longer going to fly. And yes, I voted for this. Not only did I vote for this, but calling me a racist or a bigot doesn't deter me from speaking out against BS like this. In fact, in the year 2025, it is a welcomed insult. 15 years ago would have been a much different story. You called somebody a racist 15 years ago and the hands instantly went up. I'm not a racist. I swear I appreciate blah, blah, blah. Nowadays, it's get lost. And I gotta say this, if you're one of those people thinking about leaving a comment about how much of a racist I am or a bigot or anything else, please dislike this video and never come back. You're not welcomed here. But for the rest of you, if you enjoyed the content here, be sure to subscribe to American Advocates for more, especially if you're happy to see President Donald Trump auditing the scummy, disgusting Smithsonian Institute and restoring American pride back to our nation. Let me know what you think about all this, and thanks for watching.